3DFX Voodoo and Voodoo 2 graphics are widely credited with jump-starting 3D gaming and revolutionizing computer graphics nearly overnight. The 3D landscape in 1996 favored S3 graphics with around 50% of the market. That changed rapidly as it was estimated that 3DFX accounted for 80+% of the 3D accelerator market during the heyday of Voodoo's reign. That is, until the sudden demise of 3DFX and how Nvidia bought the company's assets on the cheap. Founded in San Jose, California in 1994 by a trio of former Silicon Graphics employees, 3DFX got its start making hardware for arcade machines. The company's first-gen Voodoo chipset powered arcade hits like San Francisco Rush, Ice Home Run Derby, and Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey. But by the second half of 1996, memory prices had dipped significantly, which turned 3DFX's attention to the consumer PC market. 3DFX's Voodoo graphics consisted of a 3D-only add-in card that required a VGA cable pass-through from a separate 2D card to the Voodoo, which then connected to the display. The cards were sold by a large number of companies. Orchid Technologies was first to market with the $299 Orchid Righteous 3D, a board noted for having mechanical relays that quote-unquote clicked when the chipset was in use. That card was followed by the Diamond Multimedia's Monster 3D, the Canopus Pure 3D, Color Master Voodoo Mania, Quantum 3D Obsidian, Mural High Score, Skywall Magic 3D, among others. Voodoo graphics revolutionized personal computer graphics nearly overnight and rendered many other designs obsolete, including a vast swath of 2D-only graphics producers. The 3D landscape in 1996 favored S3 with around 50% of the market. That was to change soon, however. It was estimated that 3DFX accounted for 80 to 85% of the 3D accelerator market during the heyday of Voodoo's reign. Eventually, most of 3DFX's competition came from companies that were already established in the market producing 2D graphics, and were meaning to produce combo cards capable of 2D and 3D. While these products didn't match the image quality or performance of Voodoo, their lower price points and ease of use made them a hit with many OEMs. Demand and public's interest was there for the taking. At the time, 3DFX appeared to be in a unique position where it didn't make graphics cards directly, but sold its chipset to third-party OEMs to use in their own branded cards. The company thought that this was an issue which it would attempt to address later in its life, but more on that in a bit. 3DFX's answer to the combo card came a year later with the launch of the Voodoo Rush, which paired its original Voodoo accelerator with a 2D graphics chip on the same board. The Rush carried the same specifications as a standalone Voodoo, but because it had to share memory bandwidth with the 2D chip, performance suffered. 3DFX attempted to remedy this with later revisions featuring more memory and higher clock speeds, but it was all for nothing. The Voodoo Rush was continued less than a year after launch. The pinnacle of 3DFX's relatively short run came in 1998 with the launch of the wildly successful Voodoo 2. Built on the 350nm manufacturing process, the Voodoo 2 upped the ante with faster core and memory clock speeds of 90 MHz, respectively, up from 50 MHz on the first-gen Voodoo. There was simply nothing that could compete with it, let alone when the game had implemented the proprietary Glide API. This was before DirectX and OpenGL became industry standard. 3DFX's Voodoo and Voodoo 2 chipsets are widely credited with jump-starting 3D gaming. Some even consider this period to be the golden era of PC gaming, with titles like Quake, Quake 2, Need for Speed 2 SE, Virtua Fighter 2, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, Diablo 2, Unreal, and Rainbow Six all effectively making great use of the Glide API. The Voodoo 2 was also noteworthy in that it introduced SLI technology, meaning two Voodoo 2 cards could be linked together and run simultaneously to theoretically double the graphics processing performance. SLI allowed for higher resolutions, up to 1024 by 768, but compatibility issues and the sheer cost associated with buying too high-end graphics cards kept the feature squarely in the arena of enthusiasts and hardcore gamers. SLI would get a mulligan years later courtesy of Nvidia. 3DFX would revisit the 2D/3D combo card idea with the Voodoo BANSHEE and even submitted a design for Sega's Dreamcast game console, but was ultimately passed over in favor of a chipset from NEC. Things only went downhill from there as 3DFX decided to acquire video card manufacturer STB Systems for $141 million in a bid to make its own video cards rather than continuing to serve as an OEM supplier. In raw 3D performance, the Voodoo 2 had no equal, but the competition was gaining ground fast. Amid increasing competition from ATI and Nvidia, 3DFX looked to retain a higher profit line by marketing and selling the boards themselves, something that was previously handled by a lengthy list of board partners. That's where the STB acquisition made sense, but the venture proved a giant misstep as quality and cost of manufacture from the foundry used by the company could not compete with TSMC used by Nvidia or UMC used by ATI. Many of 3DFX's former partners formed ties with Nvidia instead. The first of 3DFX's Voodoo 3 series arrived in 1999, backed by an extensive television and print advertising campaign, a new logo, now with a small d, and vivid box art.
Here we are using technology to save the planet. Our tiny chip, it does 100 billion operations per second. That is power most awesome. And we are using it to make a difference. Imagine clean air, pure water, and a new future. I wish my family back home could see me now. And we are most proud knowing that we are doing our part to help save the planet.
Attention, everybody. We're going to forget that environment stuff and use a chip for computer games. Back to work.
3DFX PC accelerators. So powerful, it's kind of ridiculous.
Blast his freaking head off!
The company's Voodoo 3 and subsequent releases were not made available to hardware partners, effectively turning third-party manufacturing partners into rivals that had no choice but to source chipsets from competitors such as Nvidia. Nvidia returned fire that summer with the GeForce 256, which it billed as the world's first GPU. The revolution that 3DFX had ushered in 3 years earlier was now passing it by. 3DFX's last hurrah came in the form of the VSA100 graphics processor that was to serve as the backbone of the company's next generation of cards. Only two, the Voodoo 4 4500 and Voodoo 5 5500, would ever make it to market to limited success. 3DFX became the forerunner of many image quality enhancements seen today, like soft shadows and reflections, motion blur, as well as depth of field blurring. That, however, was not enough to keep them out of financial trouble. The Voodoo 5 5000, which was to resemble the 5500 but with half the RAM, never launched. Neither did the Voodoo 5 6000, a hulking card packing 4 VSA100 processors and 128 megabytes of total memory. 3DFX reportedly made around 1,000 prototype cards for testing purposes, but again, none were ever sold to the public. Some of these fabled pre-production cards did survive, although very few working examples are known to exist today. They're considered among the holy grail of gaming hardware. If you can find someone willing to part with theirs, be expected to pay several $1,000s. 3DFX pulled the trigger on a $186 million acquisition of graphics IP provider Gigapixel in March 2000 in an effort to help get products to market faster, but it proved to be too little, too late. Shortly after the first Voodoo 4 products hit the market, 3DFX's creditors initiated bankruptcy proceedings. With few options, 3DFX waved the white flag in December 2000 and sold most of its assets to Nvidia. If you're in the mood for a bit of retro gaming, you'll be happy to learn that second-hand Voodoo-based video cards are readily available through outlets like eBay. They're a bit more expensive than you likely would have guessed, nostalgia will cost you, but they're up for grabs if you're in the market. Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you like videos like these, go ahead and click the subscribe button and click that notification bell so you don't miss any more videos when they drop.